All right, Carl, I think we're now live on the Vanderbilt Commodores football group page. I want to welcome you to our next installment of Conversations with Commodores. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. It's good to see the two old guys can get technology squared away, right?
That's exactly right. Well, I've been looking forward to our conversation for a while, and I want to thank you for making a little bit of time this evening. And we got so much great history as well as things coming up to talk about, and we can just dive in. Um, Carl,
Absolutely. Honored to be here, my friend.
I first met you and didn't like you. And you want to know why? Because you had the jersey number I wanted. You wore number 12. I was 12 growing up and all through junior high and high school. And I just thought, I'm coming into Vanderbilt. That's my number. I'm going to take that number. Well, rightfully so. That was your number.
The crazy thing is I didn't want it.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, after you graduated, after the season of '87, I still had 2 more years. So I was able to inherit the number, and I wore it proudly. But thank you. Obviously, I kid.
Well.
You sure did. You absolutely did. Well, guys, for the few of you who may or may not know Carl was a wide receiver extraordinaire and so much more for Vanderbilt. 84 to 87 on the football team. What years did you play with the baseball program, Carl?
I was only with them for 1 year in '85 or in '86.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that was the spring before I got there. But you came out of Lowndes County, not too far from my stomping grounds, from Dothan, not too far from each other. And not only did you come out of Lowndes County as a proud Viking, but then Boo Mitchell and Wally Hubert also came out of there. So all three of you guys were on campus at the same time, and that was just so much fun, I know, for the three of you guys.
Without a doubt, Mickey Jacobs had recruited our area, and funny story for me was at the time Coach Jacobs came down to go over to Valdosta High School and look at some players there. Valdosta was pretty prominent during that time, and I was the Fellowship of Christian Athletes president at Lowndes County, and we had started one there, and I did a lot of work with Nick Hyder, who was a head football coach over at Valdosta. And basically, he just said, look, there's a kid over at Lowndes you need to go look at. He didn't even have me on a list. And Coach Jacobs came over, and, we hit it right off the bat. And probably the biggest thing, I remember him trying to sell Boo to the rest of the staff. And I told him, I said, if you think that I compete, wait till you see Boo. He's just a competitor. And it was just wonderful from there after. Knew Wally, his dad was an administrator in the school, and it was just good to have a pipeline. One of the things I found out later is it just matters whenever, you have kids coming from established programs where they learn how to work and they learn what a work ethic is. And that's why you see so many kids that come from so many big programs that are able to go ahead and turn the corner.
Well, that's such a tribute to where you came from Lowndes County, and from the program that all three of you guys came up through. I was noticing on one of our posts recently, one of the guys posted, I was proud to play for Vanderbilt with so-and-so, and I can't remember the guys' names, and forgive me, also from my high school. And then several other former Commodores also posted, hey, I played with so-and-so. And we saw there's so many pairs of high school teammates, or 3 or 4 teammates, who all came and played for the Commodores. I think that's pretty cool. I think you're right about that.
Well, and you go on now and you see how so many of these schools are going on. I know I'll share with you later. My older son, Kyle, was a quarterback at Clemson. And one of the things that happens there is they'll get that commitment from that quarterback early in the cycle, and then they'll build the team around. DJ Ugalele, I think, is the guy this year that is the number 1 recruit in the country at the time. The quarterback Clemson got committed, and then his wide receiver from out in California committed and is going there also this, I think, in the 21 class.
Yeah, that just seems to be a real trend, at least in the last couple of decades that I've noticed. Carl, let's talk about, you came out of high school playing multiple sports. You've now, and I'm not going to skip around on things, but you've now been on the other side coaching for several years. And I want to talk about your experience, not only as a player growing up, but now as a coach and administrator the last several years, what's the advantage, if any, for kids who play multiple sports throughout the year in comparison to kids who just focus on that one sport? Have you seen a difference? Do you see an advantage or disadvantage?
Oh, without a doubt. And as a parent, with my older son, Kyle, he is the only player in NCAA history to hit 20 home runs and throw 20 touchdowns in the same academic year. And,
Wow.
whenever we went to Clemson to visit, I remember sitting Coach Tommy Bowden and Jack Leggett down and saying, look, what's this going to take? And I love the way that Coach, Bowden said it, and that is, he goes, there's nothing more than I can do to help prepare my quarterback than to have him standing in the box in front of 5,000 people, knowing that he has to get a hit in order for us to win. And I tell people all the time that the mental aspect of baseball prepared my son probably more for football, and the physical part of football prepared him for a side of baseball that's missing from a lot of baseball guys. And so there's just components to me. I think that, we just miss the torch a lot whenever we really, pressure these kids to specialize so early. They feel like that if they miss a off season of fall baseball, or, not going through a 7-on-7 season in the spring, that somehow they're getting behind. And that's just not the case. You're just developing in a different area.
It's so funny. I saw my high school coach earlier this week when I was on business in Dothan, and I relayed or reminded him of a story, Carl, that after ninth grade basketball for me, which was largely a forgotten season, the baseball and the quarterback coach, two different coaches, sat down with me and said, we really want you to rest between football and baseball season. And frankly, I think it was their way of saying my basketball career was really over, but I got the idea. But it's true. And a lot of times you're right. The mental aspect of any sport, I think, correlates to any other sport when you've got to make decisions. It's not just that your quarterback is your shortstop, is your point guard. That doesn't always happen. It doesn't always mean they're the best for those positions. But the mental aspect of that, I think, is just so important for cultivating that mindset. And I'm sure you, as a kid growing up and saw it then, later on saw it in your children, just how that correlates. Because I know you've had other children of yours go through college sports. So I'm interested to how have you taught that or helped to cultivate that in them?
Well, I love the way Coach Swin, he said that, he loves to watch his quarterbacks when they come in, is to see how they react when the speed of the game picks up, because the good quarterbacks, it slows down though the game is speeded up. And I think that even you go back in the dark ages when we were kids, there wasn't as much focus on the mental training.
Carl's got a low Wi-Fi. He'll come back in just a second, guys. Until he does, I want to tell you a little bit about Carl after Vanderbilt. Let's see if he comes back. After Vanderbilt, Carl went on and played in the pros for almost 10 years at different levels. Are you back with us, Carl? I'm still here, bud. We can see you, but just can't quite hear you. It's just a bandwidth area issue, but he'll come back in just a second. Carl was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals in '88, played with them '88 and '89, then the Jets in '90, the Steelers in '91, the Vikings in '92. But also during that time, he was in the CFL, the WLAF. I don't even know if you guys remember that, the World League of American Football, and then concluded his pro career in '94 with the Albany Firebirds in the Arena Football League. And I'm sure we'll get into that in just a minute when he gets back in. I'm sure he's got some rain or some low Wi-Fi or something like that. I hope you guys are either watching us live or later on when you're watching us, come in and give us some comments so I can make sure that I share them with Carl. For those of you who may have played with him or knew of him either before or after his playing days, I'm sure he'd love to hear from everybody. But we'll give him another minute or so to see if he gets back into it. All right, let me tell you a little bit more about Carl's career. He's coached at Lanier County for the Bulldogs, which isn't too far from Lowndes County, where Carl is from. He was the head coach in 2015, 16, and 17, and then he made a move. Are you back with us, Carl? Can you hear and see me okay?
I'm back. I'm way out in the woods out here in Baxley, Georgia. So, we had to turn the antenna in a different direction.
Not a problem. I was telling the folks who will be watching this just a little bit of highlights about your pro football career. I didn't go too deep into it, but then we talked about Lanier County. But let's go back. You were talking about what Coach Sweeney talks about, maybe the mental aspects of playing college sports and the transition maybe from high school into college.
Well, just the ability to slow the game down and really with the advent of huddle, which is such a big component of studying film and learning the game. I remember when we used to have to get in a car the day after a game and go, drive 2.5 hours and exchange film with coaches just to be able to, prepare for the next one. Now you have everything at your fingertips, and, kids are doing so much more from a mental aspect and really being students of the game, versus the time where there were some technological handicaps that, may not have to be experienced today.
You mean they don't have to splice together the millimeter film anymore? That was one
the
of
16
my jobs.
millimeter, right?
That's right. That was one of my jobs as a redshirt freshman for Coach Christophel. I was the dude who had to help splice together the films. And Lord help you if you didn't do it the right way, the way he wanted it. Well, Carl, let's move on to your time and our mutual time at Vanderbilt. Who was the head coach who recruited you, and who did you play for before my head coach, Watson Brown, took over in the fall or the winter of '85 going into '86?
Well, I was there with George McIntyre right after the last big season whenever they were in the Hall of Fame game, and Kurt Page and Phil Roach and Chuck Scott and Alamon Matthews and all the guys were there. And, I was a wide receiver at Lowndes County, and they were throwing the heck out of it. So Coach Mike was the guy there. Watson was the coordinator. Actually, he left that year whenever I came, and I think he went to Rice, I think, from there.
He did. He went to Rice and then came on, and I was part of his first recruiting class. Wally and I and others, John Newman, many others from the South, were part of Coach Brown's first recruiting class. That would have been the spring or February of '86 when we all came on. And by this point, Carl and Boo Mitchell, also from Lowndes County, two of the better wide receivers in the last many years, were already on the roster. I was just talking about you played for McIntyre and then Coach Brown came on. But when you first started there, it was a throw mentality for that offense. So you must have been wide-eyed and couldn't wait to get onto campus for that.
I definitely couldn't. And then the crazy thing was that, when Watson came on as the coach, we were thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. And then Watson comes in and gives the whole tall tale about, well, I've done a lot of studying, and I found out that if we don't win, we're not going to be able to win. And we went to the wishbone, and it was hilarious. Going, how did we miss this,
Well, Mark Ratcher was the lead quarterback, or I guess they call it now QB1, that fall of '86. And I can't remember who were you paired with. Boo? Who was the other main receiver with the starting 11 on offense at that time?
Well, it was myself and Boo. We were there. We didn't play a tight end. We played with two backs in the backfield, and then every now and then we'd rotate a tight end with I want to say Steve Kasanovich and Nabil El Shashai. Help me, I'm trying to.
El Shashai, yep.
Nabil.
Yeah.
This is who it was. And they would rotate in there, and then every now and then I went to the sometimes too. It was a load back, and Tony Piercy and Tom Phipps were guys that were in the mix. Just great.
Well, Carl, let's talk about the mindset of your first game you got to play in. Take us to that game. What year were you in school? Who was it against? You run into the huddle or maybe straight to the line. I don't know what they were doing at the time, but you were a big fish in a little pond at Lowndes County. You get highly recruited, you come onto campus, and now you're a little fish in a big SEC pond. So what was it like from a mindset? What was going through your head that first game?
One of the crazy things I remember is, I got married right after my freshman year. Kathy and I've been married, and I remember she came up for the game home, and I didn't even dress out. I sat in the stand. And she's like, "I thought you played football," and I thought too. And I started that year, first 3 or 4 games, and I was on the bench and not even dressing. And so a punt block, and so I had worked hard on and was going to go to the gunner on the punt team, and we were going to the University of Florida down in Gainesville, which is about an hour and a half from my hometown in Valdosta. And I remember getting on the bus to go on that trip, and looking out the window, I had my coat that we were required to wear, and driving into the airport. The motorcycles in front, the sirens on, thinking, all right, you've arrived. And, going down to, I remember being at Florida, and we came out on the field, and somebody threw an orange from the stands, and it hit one of the players on the head. And we looked up in the stands, and there was a girl putting her arms up. And I'm thinking, man, this is crazy. But, what a wonderful experience. Just grew from there at that point. But, more than anything, like you said, talking about, Eric Jones and Everett Crawford and yourself and Tom Gray and, just the relationships that you formed then, and the friends that you made and things that you carry that really might not appreciate as much back then, but now you think about, man, what a great time that was.
Well, I've heard so often that your college experience, your 4 years or whatever it may be on campus, is to prepare you for the next 40 years. And I know you've got many great takeaways from your years on campus. What are some advice you'd give to some of those guys who are on the current team, the current roster, or others who are considering, being recruited by Vanderbilt? They're weighing their options between schools. What's unique about Vanderbilt? What is it that you took away that really, man, that's my school, and I'm so proud of my years there?
Well, I think first and foremost that we talk about what college is for, and that is academically to prepare you for a profession. And, to get into a school of that caliber academic, to graduate with a degree, it carries a lot of values with it, a reputation over a long time, not to mention, a great Nashville that right now is just a great place to be. But I would tell you the relationships that form there, Boo and I are both Boo's coaching up in North Gwinnett. We talk regularly, and just so many of my high school, Jacksonville, spent some time down there with him. But just so many relationships. And when you're on a school that's a smaller size like that, it's just so much more intimate and such an opportunity to really be able, to create lifelong friendships that you remember. I can still remember, I was looking through some of the old pictures of just some of the, the cheer squad and guys and girls that were on those. Like, I remember hanging out. There's a great posting you guys had the other day, Barry. I remember Barry and Will were on our hall floor. Just guys that, you really had an opportunity to build relationships with, and on a level that I think sometimes at a bigger school you don't necessarily get that opportunity.
One of my favorite memories has nothing to do with football or academics. It was one of the summers I stayed in school, like most of us did, took a class, worked out, etc. But we played softball, and Will Purdue was the first baseman on our team. I was the second baseman. And as you can imagine, I didn't stray too far to my left very often. I really played more. But, it's just fun memories like that. Will may not remember it, but I sure do. But, yeah, you're right. It's the friendships.
And you look back at it, I remember one of my biggest things, and it was whenever the Country Music Awards were just getting going. And there was a fairground over there, and they used to hire all the Vanderbilt football players to do all the security stuff over there. And I remember Brad Bates pulled us in, and the first thing they had on the racetrack over there was an outhouse race where they built an outhouse on somebody that got to sit in it and four guys that got to push it. But just things like you got May. I was reading an article that somebody posted in there the other day about Tim Corbin and the baseball program. How the Music City industry right now, with all the awards going on in the off season, baseball migrate there to work out. All the pro guys, most of them haven't played, but they had ties there because it's just such a great place to be, and they do, in the strength and conditioning aspect with baseball players in the off season.
Oh, Carl, the culture and the atmosphere that he's cultivated there. When you've got rival players from other organizations wanting to come work out there. But I can remember, and I know you remember back in the day, it wasn't called the Hawk, and it was a chain link fence that ran down right field line. And I could stand in right field and talk to my buddy Jim Schiffman in right field and maybe go retrieve a foul ball an inning later. There was nobody in the stand. And that's not a testament to what was at that time, but what Coach Corbin has built. It really is the pride of the not just the SEC, but it's the gold standard right now, I think, nationwide from a baseball standpoint.
Absolutely. And, Corbin came from Clemson and coached with Jack Leggett for years. And, Coach talked about just the very fact of being able to go them against a like Vanderbilt and to really be able to see the concept of, hey, you are here as a athlete, and you look at the pride that the guys are coming in there, and the way that Coach has gone and built that culture. I posted back up on, on myself. I said, look, anybody wants to contest that Vanderbilt ought to be in, estimate you what you want to do to get it done, because there's just no excuse. You look at some of the things now, David Price and some of those guys, they've invested back into a program that gave them a whole lot. And then you turn around and look at, the pride with which Coach Corbin takes every penny of that and says, look, you guys coming in earned the right to wear the Vandy name yet. And, in a couple of months, he makes some change, sometimes in the dugout. Right. And so just to earn the right people before them have done. And, that's one of the things that I would like to see. And it's, what comes first, the culture, or the success. And I think it's just thing. If you can get the right personalities in there and get a mix of assets around you and support, then that can be done. But it generally takes a good bit longer, for something like baseball, like football, as opposed to baseball and basketball. It just takes a while to cultivate that and to really build it.
Let's pivot for just a minute, Carl. I want to talk about you getting drafted into the NFL. Take us to that time period. Back then, I know they had NFL workout days or whatever they were called back at the time. Maybe, I don't know if you did it on campus or if you went somewhere. Talk to us about prepping for the draft and then into the draft and then going and signing with the Bengals.
Well, Coach Brown created a lot of opportunities for me that year in '87. I was coming and touched, was at the top in the SEC and receiving, and really thought, okay, here. I didn't even invite them, and there's probably, there were close numbers, and I didn't even get invited, and so it was very important. I I was looking around. Chris Gaines was, ended up going by him. We were working around at times, and All-Star were coming up, and I didn't get invited to any of those. So, I was really disappointed in what I felt like were, postseason marketing opportunities to really be able to prove myself against some better competition. And had different coaches. Ray Perkins was at Tampa at the time, who called and, worked me out. And, but it was 12 rounds then, 7 it is now. And, just home draft day. And as a matter of fact, I was drafted in the last Cincinnati Bengals. Milt Von Mann, the scout that had scouted me, was from our area. And I had a guy from the Dallas Cowboys that had knocked on my apartment door, and the draft was just about over, and they were offering me a free agent contract. And so I opened the door and let him in. He said, "Hey," it was well before cell phones were prominent. He said, "Can I use your phone?" And he picked up the phone, called the Cowboys to see what offer they could put on the table for me. And I had call waiting. Imagine that. And he beeped out. He says, "I think you got waiting." And it was the Cincinnati Bengals notifying me that they had drafted me. I was talking to Coach Weiss, who we lost this year, and I was a very good friend of mine for years as a professional, helped me as a coach in so many ways. But I was talking to him, and he was inviting me to the organization. And I remember the Cowboy scout saying, "Well, I got to go see this kid down the street and see if we can't get him signed." And just a wonderful, my rookie year, we end up going to the Super Bowl. And, but I remember, Sam was just such a wizard at really just creating culture, like I've been talking about. And our first mini camp that we went to, Sam took and he put offensive guys with defensive guys, white guys with black guys. And my roommate at that time was who was a first-round draft pick out of Oklahoma. He was a corner.
Say that again, Carl. Carl, can you hear me okay? You kind of went out. Who was your roommate at the time?
Ricky Dixon.
Okay.
And Ricky was their first-round draft pick. And, but they put us together, and it was funny. The newspapers around there were writing. They were hoping some of my intelligence would rub off on him and some of his athleticism would rub off on me. And but it was just a genius move. I tell you, I go back to the 2 years that I spent with them, and I think Sam knew that we weren't necessarily going to become best friends, but what did happen is that there was just such a mutual respect for understanding what the other guys were going through. And Ricky went through some things with his mom and his sister personally, during the time, and just listening to him talk on the phone, and having to hear the personal side of stuff, you really just knew that, who your teammates were. And I think that built a camaraderie that was just unreal for that year.
Well, you got to dress. I don't know if you played in the Super Bowl that year, and it's been 30 years since you were in that Super Bowl. What was it like, that experience? I'm sure it's tenfold now with the advent of social media and everything is in your face. But the Super Bowl was still a pretty huge deal in 89, 90. What was that experience like? I bet that was pretty unique, I'm sure.
So many storylines to that Super Bowl. It was the year of Joe Montana and the drive, and we got beat with 34 seconds on the John Taylor slant. And that year, and we had a guy on our team by the name of Stanley Wilson, who had been banned from the league for a year for substance abuse. Had a great season for us that year, but he was from Miami, and we went down to Miami, and he got around some of his old friends and had a relapse, and it's just a tragedy, of a story for them. But in every tragedy, there's always something good, and that was something good happened. I not played him at all, but I ended up dressing for that game because of the change, and got to play on the kickoff and kickoff receptions that on and a little bit on third down situations. But to be honest with you, didn't appreciate it near enough. There were guys that had been in the league for 15 years, and they were just saying, and I'm down here going, okay, where's the thing here? And trying to figure out the whole concept. And Sam did such a great job. We got to the stadium early, and it reminds you of the old Hoosiers. We pulled out a tape measure, but he rolled us out and he said, "Look, you might ever make it back here again. You got an hour, walk around the stadium, see what's going on, and let's meet in the locker room at 6:00, and let's get ready to go play ball." And I just remember walking around Joe Robbie Stadium down in Miami and seeing all the people that were there and celebrities and different functions that were going on, and it was just a unique experience all the way around. Earlier in the week, they had the riots down at in the Grove, and some tense moments down there where they'd locked off downtown. So just tons of events that surrounded it. But again, you go back to experiences that you remember, and that's certainly one that whole season was a magical season. You don't get many of those in any of your career, but when you do, you can recount. I recount very little, even of some of my best personal games, but I can probably recount every instance of that season because there's just so many relationships and so many situations that I can refer back to that mean a whole lot more to me than even the games did.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure. A buddy of ours, Mike McDonald, just joined us. OJ Fleming just joined us. I don't know if you know OJ.
Nice.
He was a few years behind both of us in the 90s. But thank you, fellas. And if you got any comments or questions for Carl, shoot them in the comments section. But Carl,
Big Mike's
Carl, I know that you got to play with 4 different organizations in the NFL. Then you went into the CFL, the WLAF, and then Albany was your last professional stop. And I don't want to belabor too deep into any of these, but I want you to share a little bit of some memory, whether it's a catch you never thought you'd make or a unique personality who was in the clubhouse. What are some things that take us inside that part of your history that give you some good memories?
Well, I really came along at a unique time for me. Roster sizes were a little smaller with no practice squads. So there was really a lot of attrition back and forth because of injured reserve rules and because of things like that. And so I found myself in some really, life-making decisions along the way, whether you really believed your fate or whether or not you were just going to walk the corporate line as you had to in order to really be able to survive. But, for me, the thing, I spent 3 years, I got that. My first 2 years I was in Cincinnati. And then my third year I was in New York with the Jets. Bruce Coslett had been my receivers coach at Cincinnati, took the head job at New York and asked me to go with him and spent the season there. And so I got my 3 years in, and 4 years is where your pension locks in. And at that point in time, I was just on the bubble every year and was really looking forward to trying to at least turn the page, but I didn't want to have wasted those last 3 years. And little did I know I'd spend probably the next 5 or 6 years, pretty much trying to get back and make one more so that I could get locked into my pension. But had some great experiences, especially out in Sacramento in the World League. You work hard, you develop your craft, you feel like you get a little bit better, and you want some opportunity to really be able to prove that. And, when I went and played in the World League, we ended up winning the championship out there. And so making friends, guys that travel the same path, that, they're trying to get back to the league for one more time. So there's so many things. I got to travel the world there. We were in Montreal, Barcelona, London, It was a wonderful experience because unlike the NFL where you stay home and you practice all week and then you get on a flight on Saturday morning and go wherever you are 8 times a year, when you're in the World League, we left on, Sunday morning after a Saturday game, and we spent the week in the town that we played. And so all the guys that you were playing with, I mean, that was your family. And going to Barcelona, you had your normal off day on Tuesday, and we would hit the sights in the city and see things that most of us had never seen. Had huge men in Barcelona sleeping in cots because the beds weren't very big, and just stories that from that experience, that whole going to London, playing in Wembley, and being able to just see some things that good old South Georgia boys don't get much of a chance to experience. Those were some things that I was really glad that I pushed myself to at least go through that experience. And whenever I hung it up, I was very confident. One of the places I'll tell you that's kind of a misnomer, somebody on my Wikipedia page misprinted some things. I didn't get to play in the Arena League at all. My wife told me if I did, she'd hang me out to dry. So I did do the CFL thing because they tried to take a lot of the World League teams and transition them over into U.S. expansion teams. And I had played up in that during a short tenure in Hamilton. And Fred Anderson, the owner of the Sacramento team that I played with, was a wonderful friend of mine, was almost like a granddad to me, and just had great opportunities again with just making relationships and seeing California, and being Sacramento's definitely not Southern Cal. And but it was just like being in South Georgia, a cow town they called it, and made some wonderful friends through that. So, that whole journey, it's again, walked through professional baseball with my son. It's one of those things that looks like a whole lot different from the inside looking out than it does from the outside looking in.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to let us go by too far. Coach Gary Shepard says to tell you hello. He's on watching us right now.
Shep is my man. Now I'm gonna tell you what, that guy right there is. We need more coaches like that guy right there in it. I'm telling you, he's got relationships. We go to a lot of USA football national conferences and spend time together, and he is a wonderful mentor to a lot of us.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so great.
My wife's over here. She goes, he fed me well at the go ahead and put the plug for the steakhouse in there too.
Oh, absolutely, Coach. And if you want to put the link to the steakhouse in the comment section, please share it out. We know you're very proud and work hard there. But let's transition, Carl, into coaching. You got into coaching. You were the head coach at Lanier County, the Bulldogs, for 3 seasons. Then you made a move in 18 to your current job. Talk to us. What was it like being a head coach for the first time? A new program, or a program that was coming back, and all eyes are now looking at you, as opposed to just a couple of quarterbacks or receivers looking at you. You got all the eyes on you now. What was that like?
Well, that journey is a little bit different for me. Whenever I got out of playing, my wife had gotten tired of transported from one place to another, and really wanted me to spend time with our kids. We had an up and coming family then. I went to work with a couple of pharmaceutical companies and spent 9 years in that profession so that I could be with my kids and be around them and watch them grow and help them. And finally I got to some point where I realized that you can do a lot of things and be good, but the truth of the matter is, till you're doing what God calls you to do, you're going to be. And, we made decisions at that time. We were down in the Jacksonville, Florida area, and I decided to go into teaching and coaching at the time. Johnny Newman got me in at the old school and coached defensive backs and special teams there. And I left there and went to Trinity Christian, spent some time at Trinity Christian coaching quarterback until I got hired at Bartram Trail as the offensive coordinator and had my son as our quarterback. And, that experience of just going through my kids' youth careers and then progress was such a blessing, being around their friends, because I had to make decisions on what I had to miss. all the things that really I had run away from as an athlete and as a professional player. My kids thought Dada was the phone, because that's the only time they got to talk to me. And but just got to be a part of their life and be in it. And all my kids, I've got 3 daughters, and every one of them played. All 3 of my boys played football, played baseball. My daughter went to Appalachian State softball there, so just got to be around them a bunch. And but when I finally got a chance to get my first head job, like you said, there's a lot more to it than you realize, and you start realizing that the organization, not just by having good leadership, but really having a with a lot of people that share the action that you do in order to become a reality, and the buck stops with you. So you get to that point where you can make good decisions for people 5 times and make one bad decision and it's all ruined. And you start learning that there's no excuses for it. You just have to grin and bear it and move on and do the best job you can. And it's a thankless position, truthfully. I have great respect. And to be frank with you, I'm a defensive coordinator at PR and have learned what it means to be a good assistant coach and to really be an asset, a head coach, because there's just so many irons in the fire for it. Sometimes it's hard to get everything covered. But it is great to be able to see your ideas, your passions that you. I'm a huge Dabo fan. I think that the way that it does is what I would like to see become the norm, and that is that it really is about integrity, and it really comes down to building relationships, and that's kind of my mantra and the way that I kind of go about it.
Absolutely, and I have 2 daughters. One played up through about 9th grade on school sports and rec sports. The other daughter played all the way through high school and a little bit of lacrosse in college. And I certainly didn't grow up with lacrosse, but I learned early on when it came out of Little League, my time as the coach really was done. I needed to let those coaches, those who were paid and really knew what they were doing. But your experience was even more so. You played professional football. One of your boys ended up playing professional baseball. How, and maybe this was a tough call for any dad, any parent, any mother. How do you go from being dad versus how much do I really need to teach him or coach him about his sport or be the dad? Where do you draw that line? Because I know that's tough for a lot of parents.
Well, I would love to sit here and tell you that I had mastered that pretty well as first time through, but I didn't do a very good job of it, to be with you. And, by the time my daughter got through, I felt like I was, when they got in the car, them. I love to watch you play. You play with such passion, and just, let them know how much I enjoy doing it. Didn't do a very good job of that with my those. Being a parent is probably the toughest as a parent. The parent's the toughest role. When they hurt, you want to answer for them, and you don't know the questions. So, the reality of it is that it's a tough, road to hoe with them. But again, some of my best, the memories that I have with my boys, my boys during school, whenever the game was over, they were out to go eat pizza and doing everything. They were waiting on me with the videotape and watch the game and go over it with me. I mean, most of the I did game planning with my son on Saturday morning before I even got with the staff. And so those were great times that were more relationship building for me and my boys. I wouldn't trade them for that. And so, but you're right. It is tough. Kids don't, we don't, when Kyle got to Clemson, I just finally just had to get to some point where understanding I didn't coach him. I just needed to be there as a support system and let him know everything's going to be okay, because there's too much pressure on big time quarterbacks anyway now. for him to have to.
Yeah, that's always for any parent, regardless of how successful or how passionate your child is. That's a tough call sometimes because every child has a different personality. Some kids don't want to talk about it at all. You're not my coach, be my dad, and
Yeah.
you just need to be quiet and let me process it in my head. Other kids cannot stop
Absolutely.
talking. They want to analyze every single play. So you're right. That's a tough
Yeah.
call sometimes. Um, so
It is,
while
and you know, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought of what you were saying, but I wanted to just, while we're talking about your children and the sports that they played, I want you to tell us a little bit about each of them, if you will, and then I want to talk about the awesome project of Northern Lights. I don't want to get out of here without us talking about that. But let's talk about the you being a
Absolutely.
parent and what your kids have done from an athletic standpoint.
Well, the biggest thing, I have four. My one, Kyle, 30. He played football and baseball. Was drafted first round by the Rockies and spent 6 years in their league and system, and then 2 years, his last 2 years in the big leagues, and he retired 2 years ago. So he's out now, and he manages company FBA Vets, and they leased, private. My middle son, Colin, he's actually played football and baseball through high school, and then he's in Valdosta where we are. And then I have my youngest son, Kendall, who actually played at SUNY Maritime up in New York, a Division III school. Had a great experience. He was our linebacker that would hit anything, and then that kind of deal. And then my daughter, she'll tell she's the best athlete of all of us. She's coaching down at Santa Fe College in Gainesville, Florida, right? Junior college softball. But she left Appalachian State as their second time home run hitter. But she coaches, and I'd say of all of them, she's the one that probably has my passion of anything, and that is just loves coaching and loves impacting kids. And she's on her way to hopefully having a long career at doing it.
Excellent, excellent. It sounds like all four of them got a solid base and are doing quite well, Carl. So congratulations to you and Kathy for what they're doing. I know you both are very proud of them. Carl, I also want to mention a quarterback who just joined us, who came on right after you graduated, one donut, Mike Healy, over in the Charleston area. Hey, Mike, good to see you, bud. I don't know if you ever got to catch any passes from Mike over the years, but he could throw.
I didn't get
good.
to catch any, but I definitely do.
Yeah. Well, talk to us. We're getting close to the end of our discussion, and I really appreciate your time and sharing your story with us, Carl. It's so great to catch up with you. Talk to us about Northern Lights, because I know part of my world intersected when you were in Jacksonville. One of my childhood buddies, Ike Sherlock, somehow, some way got involved with you guys. So what is Northern Lights? Give us a little bit of the history and what's going on, because I'm interested, and I know folks are going to want to hear about this.
Well, back in 2007, I was the Archie High School, and our coach there is a wonderful man by the name of Daryl Sutherland, still there, has been since the inception of the school. But Daryl's kind of my guy that has really helped me along the way to understand why I coach, and that is to build relationships and to impact young men. And we had gone through a character curriculum for the kids called Building Men for Others. And so we spent a whole year just trying to get our kids to understand it's not about them, but it is about, the people that you impact every day. And we're getting ready to go to church one day, and he had an outside line story on in Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost settlement of the United States, and how they have a high rate of dropout, and how they've got recurring problems of drug issues and a number of things like that are there. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to keep the natives in school. And the state had put out an incentive, basically said, if you can create some mechanism to do that, then we'll fund it the first 2 years. And Larry Zonka, who's gotten to be a good friend of ours as part of the project, basically there and spoke that school and an assembly, and how that, you know, he was on a hellion's path until football came along. And, you know, voted unanimously they needed to do the football program. And the Outside the Lines documented the program, and they showed these guys getting to you know, just gravel field. And I was the Parks and Recreation director down in Jacksonville at the time, and we were putting artificial turf fields in. And so looking at this, and my wife begins to proclaim that we are going to raise we're going to artificial turf field in Barrow, Alaska, which is the northernmost settlement in the United States that has no roads going into it, and that it is below 0 degrees, you know, over 7-8 months. And that we started. We ended up, you know, in about 6 to 8 months, nearly $1 million put a turf in. And before the season started the next year, we had their team come down to Florida, and we mentored them in how to play the game. And it's been a unique relationship for, you know, the last 13 years. And share with you my wife, I've got a copy of her book that she wrote, which is Northern Light. And, you know, the thing is it's to be become a motion picture. That we should be getting some of those things here in the next month, and she should begin filming. But, you know, it's full of our athletic adventure, a lot to do, you know, with winning games. All they win a state championship here 2 years ago. But more than that, it's just about impacting lives, you know, like we've talked about. And attention rate, even kids in school, 92, 93%. And it's had a huge impact in that community. And we go in the summer and we hold camps, and really that relationship has been a wonderful relationship. And we've learned as much from them and the new people and the people in Euro, you know, as they've learned from us. So look out for it. My wife's book on the shelf, Northern Lights. It's a great read, fairly, and we're looking forward to, you know, what impact is probably going to be more of a blindside kind of movie, and really the impact that it's going to have in the sports culture of, you know, helping us understand what our responsibility is, coach, not only to build good football players, great husbands, great fathers, and great friends.
So much of it is on the field, but so much more of it is off the field. What a fantastic story and project for you and for Kathy. I've put links in the comment section to the Amazon page to purchase the book, to Kathy's author's page, as well as to the Facebook page. So anybody who wants to read the book, make contact with Kathy, or see what's going on, go to any of those links. But I have a serious question about this, and I hope Kathy's listening, Carl. One, have you reserved a specific role for yourself in the movie? And two, any Commodores listening, can they be extras on the movie set, assuming they pass the physical requirements that are needed?
I don't know any of us could pass the physical requirements now. You're going to have to go to Barrow in order to be filmed, and I don't know that you're really up for that.
Well, Carl, I sure appreciate this almost hour we've spent, my friend. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's been pretty good. I know we've had some technical in and outs, but we've gotten the story. We've gotten to hear you and some great things that you're doing, and I sure appreciate your friendship and your time this hour.
What a blessing it's been. I'm really, as I grow older, really learn to appreciate the friendships and relationships that develop through this great game. And I go back all the time and appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I'm just trying to bring us Commodores a little bit closer together in a space where everybody can get to it. And it's only about a month old. We got 200 folks who've joined this, and we're just getting started. And I'm I'm every week or every 2 weeks or so, I'm trying to bring on former ball players, cheerleaders, coaches. We had a misfire with Coach Brown last week with the technology, but we'll get him back on there. But guys, that's going to conclude us for now. Anything in closing, Carl, before we sign off for the evening?
Be blessed. Honored to be a part of Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt football.
Couldn't say it any better. Thank you, Carl. That'll conclude us for tonight, guys. We'll catch you another time. Conversations with Commodores. Y'all have a good night. Be well.